Good morning, everybody, and on this New Year's Eve, I welcome you back to the Experimental Kitchen of War, and we'll be doing our next part in War Studies 101. We'll be doing part 2.A, the Laws of War, a very important and misunderstood subject area. Now, I apologise in advance. I studied war as a historian, a theorist of war. If you are 100% pro-Ukraine or 100% pro-Russia, you may find what we cover in this episode upsetting. I make it clear this is not intended to be controversial. I adhere to the rules of non-political activism, and I present this to you as a philosophical, theoretical, and historical study of war. A good historian has to remain objective, or as objective as possibly can be. So I'll be presenting arguments from both sides. I'm going to make it clear that I'm not justifying one side or the other. And if you have a problem with that, I refer you to my previous comment that I am not justifying one side nor the other. I'm not going to be saying who is right or who is wrong, because that is for the appropriate authorities in the world to determine, and I adhere to and accept their laws, just as I accept the terms and conditions on my employment which prevent me from being politically active or engaged in active politics. So I hope you understand that. And if you don't, please re-watch this segment of the video again. I will be disabling comments on this video because whenever you cover the laws of war, unfortunately there are people in this world who are not objective, make no effort to be objective, and are purely vitriolic, filled with hate and subjective. I don't want those comments on my channel. If you want to make those comments, go buy yourself a newspaper or find an empty space to rant away from other people. So comments will be disabled from this video. Now, in my previous video, I talked about what war is. And war is a continuation of politics by other means. Now, those means that Clausewitz referred to, they were really to do with the use of force or the implication or implied use of force such as a threat. Now, when you break it down, you have to say that the world is like a big traffic system. So each political unit, and we have a representation here of political units on the road of life, the road to, as some people say, like the talking heads, the road of nowhere. So here we are, a traffic system. All of these political systems are going about their day-to-day business and they are driving to their objective. Now, have you noticed some of these are going this way to their political objective, and some of them are going that way to their political objective. So there is an incompatibility in the world between political systems. And we have this no clearer represented than Captain America, the rules-based NATO order, and we have the Russian doll representing a different form of political system. We also have Professor Charmander, who is objective, and he will be kind of assisting us at various points. Now, the key thing to remember here, that in this traffic-like system of political entities going about their business and driving to and from their destination, there is no world police. There is no world ambulance. There is no world fire service. Okay, there are bodies that purport to represent the emergency services. The United Nations. However, the United Nations does not have necessarily authority over all the other road users, their political systems, except from United Nations Security Council resolutions. Now, this is a real problem, because if you take the laws of the road, and if I was to go out and drive my car, And say if I drove my, this is a Mitsubishi Evolution 5, Tommy Mackinnon edition, lovely car. If I was out driving this car and I was overtaking all the other political systems and I was doing 120, off I go, pulled over, ticketed, put in jail. There is no such thing in the political systems of the world. There are bodies out there, but those bodies are reliant on the other political systems getting together to enforce and provide the emergency services. So if you crash your political system in the real world, unlike if you crash your car in reality, no one is going to come and take you out of the driver's seat. Okay? What will happen is other countries will get together with their own political agendas and they will attempt to impose some form of law on you. So we first have to understand that there isn't a system in the world where there is an enforcement agency necessarily for the laws. But there are laws. There are laws which govern war, and there are laws which govern when war is started. So we have to understand that these political systems operate together, form what's called societal norms. They say that some things are acceptable societally and other things are unacceptable societally. And in this way, the current rules or laws which cover war have their roots back in antiquity, even back to the Roman, Greek and biblical and pre-biblical times. Now, I said that there's all these different political systems. Let's take these political systems and let's say that they are on the road to freedom and democracy. Let's take this carriageway here. This road says, I'm not on the road to freedom and democracy. I'm on the road to autocracy, tribal control, and religion being the driving force in my political system. What happens is somehow there is a crash. Bang! There we go. The Subaru has crashed into a Mercedes. Okay, so here we have a use of force. The cars have come together just in a road traffic accident. There's been a collision, bang, a use of force has occurred. This car and this car have imparted force to each other. This political system and this political system have imparted force to each other. Normally, in state-to-state conflict, by the use of weapons. So this car is now full of injured people within this political system, and this car is now full of injured people in that political system. Now, the laws of war, they govern what you should be doing on the road, and they govern how you should be driving on the political road. So this Subaru here should not have swerved into the path of the Mercedes. Likewise, this Mercedes, representing a different political system, should not have swerved into the path of the Subaru. Unfortunately, the Subaru has more power, more force. It discharged a heck of a lot more weapons. It breathed fire, and it caused all the occupants in that political system to be injured or dead. Now, just as a traffic collision investigator will work out what went wrong, and he will say, well, what was the situation? Were there gaps in the road furniture? Was this an accident waiting to happen? Did an international body or international system, such as the United Nations, fail to operate? Was the United Nations Security Council asleep at the wheel? So that is looking at why the accident happened, why this political system and this political system crashed into each other and used force on each other. Now, it applies to state and non-state actors. So this car might represent Hamas. This car might represent Israel. This car might represent America. This car might represent Britain. This one might represent France. So what you have in a really big war is you have a massive pile-up where everyone is firing missiles and bombs at everyone else. It is a huge car crash, and the laws of war are there to determine who caused the crash. They're also to determine what happened during the crash. So if you take a car out onto the road in the United Kingdom, for example, you have to comply with the highway code. And if you fail to comply with the highway code, you may be driving without due care and attention, driving recklessly. In addition, you have to comply with traffic law, and that's these laws on speed, using mobile phones, etc., etc. So as a historian investigating this collision, and as a society of human beings, over the period from antiquity to the present, we have come up with rules and laws to determine who started the car crash of war and who behaved acceptably during their response to or engagement in the crash of war. Now, war has a tendency, like other road accidents, that other political systems moving along the carriageway get involved in the war, and then other political systems get involved in the war, and then the bodies which are intended to sort out the political disputes run out of battery, or they haven't had enough refs that day, so they can't come out. So essentially what you have is you can have a small car crash or a small war between two political parties evolving into a massive car crash, a world war. Okay? So the laws of war that we have currently are to determine who caused the crash, who was at fault, and who behaved acceptably when they were driving on the political highway and who didn't. These concepts are post-World War II concepts, although they root back to antiquity. Jus in bello, justice in war. This is a Latin. So justice in war. This determines your conduct during the war. It's effectively the highway code or traffic law telling a state or non-state actor how they should behave in that conflict. And then you have jus ad bellum, again Latin, post-World War II concept but rooted in antiquity. This is to do with the why. So why is there a war? Who caused the car crash? It determines the rules for when you are allowed to crash your political car into another political car. It determines who is right and who is wrong, and that is important because in the post-World War II payout, we have ways of bringing offenders, people who have started war illegally, to justice. And that often results in payouts for the victims, which is effectively your insurance payout. Now, the system is not foolproof. It is not like law within one state, because we are talking here about non-state and interstate conflict, and that is not covered by the world police. So Captain America and the rules-based order, who he is, they may think that they have the right to determine the rules. So Captain America says, I don't like what you're doing, that's illegal. He goes to the United Nations, of which he actually sits on the Security Council, and he tries to force his political will onto others, or have his political will represented. Take it very simply, the Russian doll says, I don't accept your view of the rules, I don't accept your view of the political system, And you know what? If you want to have a conflict or crash your car into me, well, I will respond with like-minded people. Iran, the global south, China. So what you can quickly happen is that a dispute between political systems, Captain America, the Russian doll, turns into a massive car crash where Captain America, the Russian doll, are trying to influence the United Nations Security Council to accept their political view, and all of these political entities are lined up against each other. That's really unfortunate for countries like Ukraine. Here is the Ukrainian political system. It has been out driving, and it used to drive with the Soviet system. It then decided that actually it could get better alloy wheels, a better exhaust and a better sound system by switching over to Captain America's rules-based political system. This really upset the post-Soviet successor state, the Russian doll, because they say, you used to be one of my children. The Ukrainian driver says, I don't like being one of your children. It's had a RTC into a pedestrian there. It's supported by all of these political actors. The Russian doll says, well, you ain't getting away that easy, and decides to send in a special military operation or special military farce or a war, a use of force for political means. War is a continuation of politics by other means. It's armed Land Rover. And here you have a war set against a political backdrop with all the political actors and everything that's going on. And this will upset people that purely support Ukraine and that purely support Russia. So I say this very carefully, and I'm being non-empathetic for a reason. I appreciate that you are suffering. Okay, I do have empathy. But what I must remain clear on is, as a war historian, and just as a traffic investigator investigating a road traffic collision, there is normally an element of fault between both drivers. Now, the rules of war, just ad bellum, why there is a war, the rules for starting war, are used to determine who is right. And then ultimately they will be used after the actions of international bodies, international criminal courts, to determine the administration of justice and an insurance payout or a payout from the defeated aggressor to the victim. And whilst all of that is going on, and whilst that car crash is still happening and getting worse every day, the rules for conduct of war, jus in bello, justice in war, the highway code or traffic law for how you conduct your war, will determine who is acting correctly when they are crashing their car into their rival's political system. Now, this is a very, very complicated subject. This is part 2.A. So this is an introduction to why there are laws in war and why there are rules for war. In the next episode, and this is probably going to be a 3-part sub-series, we will look at how jus ad bellum, the rules for starting war, evolved from antiquity to now. We will look at how this concept of right and insurance payouts came out after World War II from the Nuremberg trials. And we will look at, in part 3, Jus in bello, justice in war, the rules for conducting war. Now, I'll make it clear, my intention in making this video is not to cause offence. This is a theoretical war studies video. It is not political. I'm not making a comment on whether the rules-based order under Captain America is right, or whether the Russian doll-based order under Vladimir Putin and Chairman Xi is right. Okay, I'm not doing that. I'm not being political. I'm trying to be objective. And again, if this causes you upset because you think that your driver, or the driver that's driving your car, has more rights than the driver driving the other car, then I would refer you to the start of the video that this is not about determining who is right, it's about understanding the subject. So I hope that's helpful. And like I said, there'll be 3 more parts, and then we'll look in more detail as to what rules cover the use of these toys, what rules cover the use of fire and force to start a war, and what rules cover non-state actors as represented by this MiG-17. I hope you have a lovely new year. Let me know if this is helpful, and take care.